Hey everybody, this is how to interpret the slope and y-intercept from a least squares regression line. So I'm also going to talk about computer output in this video, so this one might take a second. So the interpreting the slope and y-intercept is pretty easy, but I'm also going to tell you how to read slope and y-intercept in computer output. So you plug this stuff into your calculator, and experts or statisticians usually use a program called Minitab they plug it into. Either way, the goal is to get it into a format that looks like this. It's kind of in a y equals a plus bx. Kind of looks like y equals mx plus b. The one next to x is always your slope. The one standalone is the constant, if you will, is always called the y-intercept, the one that doesn't get changed. And then we actually call y, we say y hat, because this is a prediction line, so we are making a prediction with this, not talking about actual points. Y hat means predicted y. It's the predicted y that happens when you plug in x. So we are going to talk about interpreting the slope and y-intercept first. So the yellow one is the slope. So we'll talk about that. Every time x goes up by 1, y goes up by slope. That's the way it works usually. So the way this one is, to interpret this for, again, I'm using the same advertising dollars and items sold example from before. So if I had a least squares regression line on there with that equation, I could explain this by saying every time I spend more on advertising, $1 more on advertising, that's 1. That's x going up by 1 right there. Sales go up, that's y. Oh boy, sorry. That's y. Sales go up by 0.5281 items. I should probably say items, but you know. Okay, so the y-intercept is what happens when x equals 0. You'll notice actually this doesn't show the y-intercept on it. It only goes down to 40. The real y-intercept is like, you know, 20. It's like way the heck down here somewhere. So it's actually going to end up going negative before it hits the y-intercept. So when I talk about the y-intercept, it's going to sound weird. But just keep in mind, it's not like at 15. It's going to be somewhere down there. So the y-intercept is just when x equals 0, y equals blank. And you want to always interpret in context. So, and that's because when you wipe out this x value, when that's a 0, it wipes out this whole thing, you're left with just a y. So when ad dollars spent are at $0, we sell negative 5.3 items, because that's the y-intercept there, the negative 5.3. All right, so now we are going to talk about, boy, it's that time of year, you know. We're going to talk about computer output. So I'm going to pull up Khan Academy from our class, and they have good computer output problems. So I'm pulling it up from one of my AP Stats classes in 2020 right now. And what happens, all right, so when it talks about computer output, at least this is when an expert statistician plugs this data in a Minitab. It doesn't just give them the equation like it gave us, like calculators give us. They have a lot more options and they use a lot more data, so they don't want to plug stuff in calculators. So their output looks like this. And it looks kind of crazy. I'll zoom in a smidge here. It looks kind of crazy. But what I see is I see constant and views. Views here are based on how many views, it's one of the variables in here. So the constant, this is your y-intercept. I'll explain why in a second. This is your y-intercept. This is your x variable. And this is your coefficient on x right here. That's the slope. R and R, you have R squared here. R squared is cool. If you want to find R, you can square root it. And with the things you don't need to worry about is you don't need to worry about anything that I'm crossing off in blue. Like all that stuff is for like nonlinear stuff, and later on in the year, this crazy stuff we'll do later. But as far as most of the year, 99.9% of the year, all you need is just to know the y-intercept and the slope. And the reason why this is the case is uh, because you write things in the y equals a plus bx, which is definitely a situation for, well, this is a constant, and again, the coefficient on the constant, that's just this a, that's your y-intercept, right? And then the slope is the coefficient on your x variable. So the coefficient, COEF stands for coefficient, it's an algebra term, on your x variable, which is views. So this right here is your slope. So if I'm not trying to answer this question, notice they even use the y hat. They just say what the variable is. So it's views, and it looks like number of likes is dependent on how many views. So we already know x is the views because we have it here. So views is, it's got to be one of the top two. The coefficient's 0.34, so it's going to be this one. They put likes as the y hat, and they have the coefficient for the constant. The constant, remember, that's the y-intercept right there. So yeah, it's B. I hope that helps. That's interpreting and reading slope and y-intercept.